Hi everyone, I'm Will Harper, previously branch leader at ACC's branch at Creighton University before I graduated in the spring. Today, I'm here to introduce Parker Cardwell with Rainmaker. Parker will be sitting down with ACC President Chris Barnard for a fireside chat about cloud seeding, an innovative technology that could solve environmental challenges like drought and water shortages.
Awesome. When I ever first heard of cloud seeding, I was like, that's pretty sketchy.
Yeah, that's most people's first reaction to it, but no, I mean, it's an understandable so. I mean, the idea that you can actually make more snow and more rain over mountainous regions and in the western part of the United States is something that most people aren't familiar with, although we've been doing this in the United States since 1946. So although it's new for most people here, it's actually a relatively old American practice.
So I want to just quickly test the room. Put up your hand if you know what cloud seeding is. Okay, pretty good.
That's not bad.
If you know what cloud seeding is, put up your hand if you generally are like in favor of cloud seeding. Okay, a little less enthusiastic.
This is good.
If you know what it is and you're more skeptical of it, put up your hand as well. Okay, so you got a few people to win over today.
Yep.
Let's start at the beginning. Like, what is cloud seeding?
Yeah, so cloud seeding, I guess actually we'll start with the natural precipitation process, like how snow and rain actually occurs in the United States. So basically what happens is you get big fluffy clouds that come across the Pacific or the Atlantic and then traverse across the United States. And along the way, either dust, pollen, or some material from the ground will loft up into that cloud and then act as a centerpiece for a snowflake. So then water will then freeze onto that particle and then become heavy enough to fall. And so what cloud seeding does is we basically take a mineral or a particle, it's called silver iodide, 10 times safer than the salt on your table right now, and it acts as that centerpiece for a snowflake because it has that same crystal structure as ice. And so when we introduce it with the drones that you saw in the video, you can basically just kickstart or encourage that cloud to get a little bit more precipitation from it. So we don't create clouds. All we can do is take those clouds that God made and try and get a little bit extra out of them. So that's how it works.
And so how does that differ from kind of a lot of the other conversations around weather modification? Like some people talk about chemtrails, some talk about like generally weather modification. Like how is cloud seeding different from those kind of concerns that people have?
Yeah, so the way that we see it, there's like three kind of like frames of mind, or like three topics to touch on in this conversation. You have cloud seeding, which is very different than the rest of the two things. You have geoengineering, and then you have like the chemtrails or the contrails. So we'll start on the back end of that. So the white lines that people see in the sky, oftentimes this is just exhaust from aircraft. So at like 30 to 40,000 feet, Delta Airlines that's flying over the park right now, it's at incredibly high altitude, so it's very cold up there. And so when you introduce humidity that also has particulate from the exhaust, it's going to cause that to freeze and then create kind of like a mini cloud. That's why you're not going to see it leave. It'll kind of traverse and the wind will blow it around. So as far as like chemtrails go, I sure hope that the government is not doing anything nefarious. I don't think that they are. And the Administrator Zeldin from the EPA just released some great guidelines on what is actually happening to educate people. So I understand the mistrust from the government in terms of like what we don't know what's going on, but the white lines that we see in the sky really are just contrails and water vapor from exhaust. Then second is geoengineering. Geoengineering, primarily through the kind of the technology of solar radiation modification, is the idea that at between 60 and 100,000 feet in elevation, you can release these particulates, usually like aluminum oxide or sulfur dioxide, to basically create a boundary layer in the atmosphere to try and reduce the amount of solar radiation that can penetrate the atmosphere. So this is the idea that they're trying to cool the planet or reduce global warming, and kind of what their idea is. That's far and away different from cloud seeding, because cloud seeding is really just more of a water supply technology. All we're doing is taking existing clouds, existing weather patterns on a very small scale, so over like a small river basin or watershed and like one county or one area of a mountain range, and then you can just kind of get 10 to 20% additional snowpack or rainfall over that region to try and get more water. So we're not trying to block out the sun, we're not trying to do anything on large climate intervention scales like geoengineering is. It really is more akin to irrigation than anything.
So you said it's been around since the 1940s, but it feels like there's a new moment now, right? Like people are talking about you guys as a company. There's like government contracts that are being discussed. It's on social media. your CEO Augustus has been going on Alex Jones and Sean Ryan and all these shows to talk about this. What's different between the 1940s and now in terms of the technology and your approach?
Yeah, so I mean, before like really the 80s and 90s, when radar technology started becoming more abundant in the United States, where our weather ability to forecast weather and our ability to look into the clouds, into those weather patterns to see what's actually happening, there was no way to truly prove that cloud seeding worked. So before like that, even really the best in class science was concluded in 2020 by National Center for Atmospheric Research. But before then, it was just the idea that we could look at one storm or one cloud and say, oh, it rained or snowed a little bit more than the cloud next to it. And so it was relatively unsophisticated. You could prove in a lab, you could look into a cloud chamber, introduce some humidity, cool the temperatures down, and then see the liquid water convert into ice. So you knew in practice that it worked, but there was no way to really prove it. But in the SNOWY campaign, the research campaign done by NCAR, funded by NSF, was for the first time we were able to look at like the radar data, the same one that the National Weather Service uses to forecast, and you're able to basically see the conversion of liquid water in cloud, which is the most abundant, like kind of the state that a cloud lives in, and you can see that process, like that precipitation process, start to kick off once you introduce the minerals into the cloud. So you can kind of see that activation window. In their campaign, they used an aircraft flying in the cloud, so you can see the flight track, and then you can correlate and see how much precipitation was yielded after that campaign was concluded. So now we can say, okay, we know that it works, so we can see it working in real time. But most importantly, for the partners that we work with, whether it be an irrigation district or Department of Natural Resources, we can actually prove how much water you're creating. So much like how desal, you can get a consistent yield of water produced, now we're able to look at those scans and say, all right, in this event over the course of the season, we produced 100,000 acre feet of water. For most states and most counties, this is a significant amount.
So let's put this in the broader context. Obviously, water is kind of one of the lifebloods of humanity. There's a lot of conversations around the world, but especially like places like the American West, where water is so critical to agriculture, to the economies, to the ski industry, to like places like Las Vegas in California that are so reliant on the Colorado River. Let's put this in the broader context of why are you guys like having these contracts with like states like Utah and Texas and Oregon? Like, what is it that appeals to them about this? And what are like some of the specific applications of the technology that you guys are building?
Yeah, and I think this starts with the water conversation, right? Like most Americans, I mean, how many people's faucets work this morning, right? How many showers were you able to step into? For a lot of Americans and most people throughout the world, water is just a novelty that we are able to use every single day. And so it doesn't seem like there's a scarcity of it. But in the West particularly, you have an enormous water shortage. I mean, and even if there's not like a shortage, there's a little enough amount where the cost of water is tremendous. In the Central Valley of California, you're looking at an acre foot of water in the springtime being north of $10,000 an acre foot. That's only 330,000 gallons. So a tremendous cost to agriculture, which is driving the cost of groceries in the grocery store. And so when we come to them and we say that, hey, we can actually produce the cheapest, like highest return on investment of water produced in the United States, that's an interesting argument for them. Because if you look at desalination, one, you can only really use it on the coast. You can do some brackish desal inland, but the cost of desalinated water on average is about $1,600 an acre foot. So still an enormous cost to a lot of these people. And those infrastructure projects take 6 to 10 years before they're actually producing the first acre foot of water. And then, not to mention hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars to stand those up. Whereas we can build a few drones, let Mother Nature bring the clouds in, and then we can start producing consistent yields of acre feet of water at below $300 an acre foot. So, and it's more targeted where we don't have to build hundreds or thousands of miles of pipelines. Like in the state of Texas, they just announced a $7 billion investment in water. They're trying to pipe water from East Texas out to West Texas. And they're never gonna see that water for the next decade, and it's gonna be a tremendous cost to taxpayers. So we can take the clouds where they come in, and we can put water where it's most usable. So whether it be recharging an aquifer, putting more water in a reservoir, increasing stream and river flows, you stabilize the ecosystem in a way that it wasn't capable in the interior of the United States unless you can bring more precipitation down to the ground.
Yeah, and like you said, there's just so many applications of water that I think most people don't necessarily fully understand on a day-to-day basis. It's similar with energy, right? Like when you flick on a light switch, you don't necessarily kind of make the full connection to where all of that comes from, and that's part of the energy conversation that's lacking in the United States. But with water as well, it's out west, like you mentioned, agriculture. If you have less water, it's going to be more expensive to produce the food, and that's going to have a consequence for everyone, for cities that are trying to expand and build a population growth. AI data centers use up a lot of water. Even like you need a lot of water to do fracking for oil and gas. Like that, there's just so many applications here. We saw one of the big issues out in California during the wildfires in LA that there was not enough water in the reservoirs and in the pumps there to be able to actually tackle the wildfire crisis. We have ski resorts out west that are seeing like their snowpack has declined by 50% since the 1980s. That's a huge impact on these outdoor recreation states like Colorado and Utah and elsewhere. So let's maybe pivot into one of the states that you're most active, which is Utah.
Yep.
You have the largest like government contract so far is in Utah. One of the big issues that Utah is facing right now is the Great Salt Lake, which is diminishing every single year. It's not just, there's less water in the lake. Like, it has all kinds of other consequences, right? One of them being that there's all kinds of bacteria and other like harmful things that are kind of in the bed of the lake that are being released into the air now as there's less water, and that's impacting public health. It's impacting snowpack and things like that. So what specifically are you guys doing in Utah, and like what's, I guess, the promise of cloud seeding that you're bringing to Utah? How can that be applied elsewhere?
Yeah, so I mean, we coordinate with a lot of the local irrigation and water districts in their like specific counties, and then collaborate with the Department of Water Resources there to kind of build an effective strategy on where we're going to place, whether it be like the drone operations or what we're going to do, and what the most impactful watershed that we can target. But really, our overarching goal is to refill the Great Salt Lake. The Great Salt Lake now is 500,000 acre feet below its, like, I think, lowest point in the last couple decades. And so, like you said, that toxic dust that's blowing up into the valleys there, where that's going to impact crop production. The lake effect is the largest producer of snow in Utah as well. So the declining levels of water in Utah, or in the Great Salt Lake, are just going to put less snow in the mountains. So the idea that we can, and what we're really excited to do is we're working with the state government right now in Utah and in Idaho on a shared program between Utah and Idaho on the Bear River Basin, which is flowing 60% of that river flows into the Great Salt Lake. So building that long-term strategy where, I can't say that we're going to refill it in year one, but over the next couple of years, you can start chunking away at it and then build this long-term resilience strategy to basically build like what is a national treasure, but also a treasure to Idaho or to Utah, to try and consistently produce more water for farmers along that basin, then ultimately yield enough water to reduce the effects of the migratory birds that are dying on the shorelines, to reduce the toxic dust that's blowing into the valleys, and then ultimately just provide that beauty. I mean, we got to make America beautiful again, make Utah beautiful again with one of its greatest assets there.
Awesome. Carla was giving me the wrap-up signal. Carla, do you have time for a few questions, or is that okay? One very controversial question. Who's got one? I want to make sure, like, I know this is something a lot of people have questions about. Do we have a mic we can maybe bring here? I know this is something that you guys probably have questions about. Parker is going to be here all weekend, so make sure to confront him in the lobby and get all your cloud seeding questions in. I hear he loves those kinds of questions, so.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Give you one. If you want a controversial question, I'll give you one. What is the worst state government elected officials that you've ever had to deal with on this issue?
Whoa.
None of the ones sitting here.
No, these are all wonderful. Right now, I wouldn't say there's like a worse one, right? Like they're all doing what their constituents elected them to do, right? And so for a lot of the folks that we're working with now, it's the concerns that are coming out of the federal government, whether it be Congresswoman Taylor's Green bill, who she's looking to ban chemtrails, really, but the geoengineering and weather modification in the United States. And this is largely in part because her constituents are looking up and they're not understanding what those white lines are. And so people contribute that with a lot of government mistrust that they've kind of built over the last years, and then applying that to some like idea or theory that there is something nefarious going on. And so it's really not who's been worse to work with, but it's like there's an educational barrier where a lot of it's the weather patterns and the process of precipitation is a very complex one. So how do you explain that in a digestible way where we're talking about this, where we're providing more water for their farmers in those states, but then kind of eliminating some of the conspiracies and concerns that might be kind of muddying the water, like no pun intended, on that, where like it's just getting past that, where let's have a conversation, let's have an open dialogue, and let's go talk to your constituents, let's go talk to you in your office. And so it's more so who's open to the idea of having the conversation. We're not necessarily asking them to run a bill and support cloud seeding in the United States, but more so to understand this as a viable way to make water abundant in the U.S., to build a sustainable agricultural production, like a supply chain in the U.S. And so once we can get past that barrier of that conversation and kickstart this where people are aware and understand what's going on, I think that's when we can start to make really good progress.
Awesome. Thank you. Give it up to Parker.
Thanks, guys.